adoptive or spiritual father, I say to you, Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Not a single one of us would be here if it weren't for Father, and I know it doesn't get as much hype as Mother's Day. There's never as many cards as Mother's Day. You know, on Mother's Day, AT&T says that the phone lines are jammed up. Father's Day, you can get right through. Oh, no problem. And God forbid that you ever forget a present for your mother on Mother's Day. But on Father's Day, you get a phone call, they say, we love you, and they're not coming down, and you say, oh, thank God. I can watch TV. But Father's Day does kind of tie into today's lesson from the Gospel of Mark about planting seeds. Like I said, whether you are the biological, adoptive, or spiritual father of someone, you are constantly spreading seeds on the earth, especially with your children. You know, we have these beautiful children, and we want them to grow up to be perfect. Sometimes they want them to grow up so perfect that they're just like us. With all our brokenness, we still think we want them to be just like us. How many times in the past have you read of stories where children were brought up into the family business and they hated it? But it was their responsibility. They had been groomed all their lives to be into this family business, whether they wanted it or not, and it was thrust upon them and they were miserable. Because the seeds had been planted and cultivated, and the human beings got in the way of God. We do that all the time. Wherever we plant seeds, we want to see them grow up to be what we want them to grow up to be. You don't want to plant beans and have radishes come up. You don't want to plant corn and have okra come up. You want to make sure that everything comes up the way it's supposed to. But it doesn't. You know, if you look at our trees out front here, no matter how much we try to make them to grow straight and strong like the cedars of Lebanon, because of the location of the sun and the location of the trees, those trees just lean over like that, no matter what we do. Do you remember the 4 pine trees we had out front that just leaned so far over, they almost touched the roofs of the car? We had to cut them out. They just would not grow the way we wanted them to be. But they did grow the way God planted them to be. And that's what God is telling us today through Jesus, that we are to do the planting, and we have to at times allow God to tend the plant and let it grow up. But too often, in human terms, parents, especially fathers, plant seeds all the time that they're not aware of. And it comes back to bite them right. It comes back to bite you. And, you know, we want our children to grow up and respect things. And sometimes we get so strict that we don't allow the child to grow and blossom and flourish and become what God is calling a child to be. Oftentimes, a child will come to a parent and say, why do I have to do this? And usually the father says, because I said so. That is not a good way to plant a seed. Because I said so. I know it happens in every family because they have said why since they could first talk, and you get irritated and you just want them to do it, and you just say, because I said so. But what kind of message does that send? It says to me that the message of God is being subverted by the message of parents. You know, as I said, we plant seeds all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. You know, I catch hell all the time from my colleagues about baptizing children who never doing weddings for people who never come to church, or funerals for people who have never entered the church. And I say to them, and I truly believe this might be a seed planting opportunity. Many of you remember Terry Heater, who was a member of Church of the Ascension, but couldn't stand having a female priest, who happened to be my wife. Couldn't stand having a female priest be the celebrant at his uncle's funeral. And so at the last minute, they called here and said, "Would you do a funeral?" And I said, "Sure." And after Terry and I got to know one another, he began worshiping here, and his whole life was transformed. He found a place where he was loved and accepted. Not because he was a nurse or a tithing Episcopalian, but because he was Terry Heater, a child of God. And he found that he was able to be himself. And that all started from a seed that took place in the funeral. A few weeks back, I got a phone call from a young man who was getting married in the Roman Catholic Church who needed copies of his baptism records because he couldn't get married in the Catholic Church without them. And so as I was digging them out, we spoke on the phone and he talked about how important Holy Trinity had been in his formative years. And like most people, he was confirmed and left and never came back. That's like that joke, if you ever want to get bats out of your church, confirm them and they'll never come back. But he never came back. But a seed was planted at his baptism 33 years ago. And it grew. And it sustained him in his life in Christ because of the people here. And he's getting married in the Roman Catholic Church. And that tree will continue to grow and blossom because it was planted properly by Holy Trinity Episcopal Church. And so when my friends say, "Oh, I won't do that," I think they're putting their rules in front of God's dreams. And so whenever we have an opportunity in this congregation to plant a seed, we will do that. But, sometimes, especially fathers, plant some terrible seeds. I realize Ian's not here, is he? He said he might show up. Ian, my son, when he was 13, was a friend of a 15-year-old whose father was the county sheriff. They snuck through the woods, over the fence, through the barbed wire, up the ladder, to the roof of the elementary school. After the party that they had up there, they climbed back down, got into the father's sheriff's car, and drove around Manchester. And of course, he came right home and told me about it. No, it was only a couple of years ago, after he graduated college, that I heard this story. And I said, "What would ever make you think to do something like that?" And he said, "Dad, I heard about you when you were a teenager, and this was nothing like what you did. So the seed I planted had come back and bit me." But he also works for Catholic Charities. He works with the poorest of the poor. He ministers to those who have English as a second language and brings them into the school system in Carroll County. He helps feed them, educate them, get their documents and everything so that those children who are being planted in this country can grow up to be intelligent adults.